And we kicked off this afternoon by Anthony Carlin, whose talk is titled "Don't Book a Judge by the Cover." Now, up until Boxing Day of last year, the name Anthony Carlin wouldn't have meant anything to me at all because I don't read the papers, I don't watch TV. But even the alternative media wasn't really covering what was going on with Anthony in Northern Ireland. And 3 days before Boxing Day, I had been, finally, Rathlin Energy had managed to drag me into court. And I'd had a pretty entertaining event in the court there, but I'd managed to get the can kicked down the road. And Anthony sent me a text at about 3:20 in the afternoon on Boxing Day, obviously bored. And basically, it was fairly jokey little text, but it resonated. And he was asking a couple of questions about what I had been through in the courts on the previous day. Well, I was sufficiently motivated to give Anthony a call. I spoke to him for about half an hour on the phone, and I realized that this guy had knowledge that could be extremely useful and beneficial to my journey over the next few months with Rathlin Energy. So I took a trip over to Belfast and met with Anthony and some of his colleagues in a group that they call Common Law NI. And the amount of knowledge that these guys have is awesome, truly awesome. And my challenge, and with Anthony's help, was to actually filter it and try and decide how much of this was actually practicable within the time that I had to sort of integrate this information. Because the team that Anthony works with are so unbelievably well informed on so many aspects of common law, it would absolutely blow your mind. I mean, we're going to scratch the surface on some this weekend, but these guys have enormous knowledge. The challenge, of course, is that what works in theory, or what should work in theory, doesn't always translate into practice, and that's the challenge. Well, the other reason that I felt motivated to meet with Anthony is because these guys are leading from the front. You know, you can always spot the pioneers because they're the ones with the arrows in their backs. But yeah. Anthony had the arrows sticking out of his forehead, his neck, everywhere. And so I thought, yeah, I got to talk to these guys. And what I didn't know at the time when I first went over to Northern Ireland, in fact, Anthony picked me up from the airport, and on the way back to his house, he dropped another bombshell. He said, "Oh, by the way, you do know I'm a serving police officer." So I'm like, take me back to the... And I said, "No, that's fine. Oh, God, what about... But of course, as the next couple of days unfolded and I started to understand what Anthony had been through, in his challenge with one of our major banks, and I'll leave him to tell you that story, I realized that this guy was not only just passionate, but he was so principled, he was determined to take it however far it needed to be taken. And the reason I said that I couldn't actually confirm his invitation to speak here was because he went to court, and I'm going to paraphrase, he can fill in the gaps, but he went to court in, whenever it was, late January. So Anthony turned up at the court in his police uniform and tried to arrest the judge. Unfortunately, Anthony ended up getting arrested and was then asked to return to the court to face a charge of contempt, where the judge gave Anthony the opportunity to apologize. Anthony's response was, "Good luck with that." You know, and unfortunately, of course, ended up being a guest of Her Majesty for a few weeks. And, you know, he has demonstrated that not only has he got an enormous amount of knowledge built up through, you know, personal experience, but he's also a man of absolute integrity. And nothing is or will compromise that integrity. So it is absolutely with great pleasure that I was able to invite and now welcome Anthony and his wife Maxine, who stood by him all the way through this, wherever Maxine is. There you are, Maxine. Amazing, because, you know, without the support of close family, this is just not possible. It's difficult enough when you have got the support, but without that support, it is nigh on impossible. So it's, you know, credit to both Maxine and to Anthony that they're here today. So without further ado, Anthony Carlin.
Hello, can you hear me okay? With the mic? Yeah, you can. Just waiting for the slide to come up here. Okay, thanks very much for having me, Ian. It's been a real pleasure. It's been a sort of journey. Ian sort of befriended me in and around the time as this was unfolding. I'm going to sort of clarify a few points he made there. I think he was sort of technically wrong in what he was saying there, but I'll clarify just there. So my name's Thomas Anthony Carlin. That was the name that was used in the papers an awful lot. It was my full title. So basically, I'm involved with a group called Common Law NI. It's based in, we meet every Monday night in Cookstown in the Glenavon Hotel, 7:30, except for bank holidays, even though we're fighting the banks. So that is our web address, the group email, and my personal email. And I'll put this slide up again at the very end. So if anybody wants to connect with me later on, if I don't get to chat to you, you can email me at boonox@hotmail.com and just put AV7 in the subject so I can reply back to it. I just want to establish the context in which I'm speaking here today, just to clarify it. So at this minute in time, as in from eight days ago, I'm now an unemployed civilian. I'm an ex-PSNI officer since last Friday at 1:15. I'm a husband and father of 2 daughters. I'm a Reiki master, and so is my wife Maxine. I'm now a time-served criminal convict. I never thought I would say those words. I'm a defendant in an ongoing 5-year-long repossession case where Santander UK is trying to steal my family home, and they're not going to get it. As you'll see here, I'm not a professional speaker. I'm not the first person to discover many of these points and to argue these points. I'm just cherry-picking them and putting them together in something that's, I'm hoping you'll understand where I'm coming from. I'm not seeking publicity or attention, contrary to judicial opinion in Northern Ireland. I'm speaking here because I didn't have a voice in Northern Ireland. It was one-sided press from the court press releases. They were saying everything from their perspective, but there's always two sides to a story, and I think it's only fair. I've been put through the mincing machine in Northern Ireland, and it just sort of flopped out the other side eight days ago. And now I want to just tell my story. So I'm not a pushover. I'm a bull terrier with a bone, and I'm very determined, but I'm very respectful, and I try to keep my integrity there at all times, because people judge you by how you act. I'm simply telling my own story from my own perspective. And during this process for the last 6-8 years, I've had to develop nearly superhuman-like coping strategies and a really good sense of humour to try and cope with it, because when you're in the firing line, it's really difficult to cope with it and switch off from this crazy stuff and then just be a dad and a husband and go and do shopping and all that sort of stuff. So, so there's humour throughout this, but it's a very serious subject. So I'm not going to get by that there. I spoke with Willem and Zen Gardner, and basically me and Willem's going to have a slide-off, a competition to see who can get the most slides done in 75 minutes before the Constable jumps up. Get off the stage! So I'm going to skip this stage here. Right, okay, so I'm coming from, I woke up in 1998, started looking into stuff, and what I'm going to say is that all of these things here, they're nothing to do with the fight that I've been involved with, but they're very important. Chemtrails, geoengineering, provable fact, the data's there. Fluoride, the Lancet magazine, leading universities have came out and said it's a neurotoxin that causes cancer, but it's still in toothpaste, and the system just ignores that. Wi-Fi, EMF, all of that stuff is carcinogenic. Walter Graham in Northern Ireland, he speaks about it, he's a very good speaker. GMOs, genetically modified frankenfood, TTIP, Codex Alimentarius was the first time I ever heard Ian speaking, that's what the subject was. Aspartame, my 2 daughters check every product now before they drink anything. 9/11, the significant part of me, if you don't look at anything other than 9/11, other than the fact that the BBC knew Building 7 was going to collapse prior to it, and that's been ignored ever since. The media is compromised, and it always has been. And if you don't focus on anything else, just that one point. As a serving police officer, I didn't outwardly say it, but cannabis oil and Rick Simpson oil has got immense healing properties, and cannabis should be legalised. Because it's the pharmaceutical companies that are just benefiting, and people aren't getting the help that they need. Hemp's a highly sustainable product. easy growing, it's BPA free, and it's better than petroleum-based products. I think there's someone going to speak about this, but there's vaccines. The Vaxxed movie, Robert De Niro was involved with it. All of these subjects about how bad vaccines are, and probably the most important one is Ty Bollinger, The Truth About Cancer series. It's absolutely mind-blowing. The pharmaceutical companies are liars. The whole thing's rigged. And everything I'm saying here, I've spent since 1998 learning this stuff, and it's absolute fact. Okay? So when I move forward now, the position I'm coming from is that the pendulum has now swung. If you don't know everything I just said there as a provable, demonstrable subject, as fact, then I'm scared to inform you that you're in the sheeple category. You're a sheeple. If you don't understand that, you're sheeple, and that's it. And your apathy has become tiresome for the other people. So I'm hoping today to jumpstart people by demonstrating that they're nothing more than a debt slave. And hopefully that will trigger their, they get up every day to go to work, to go and do their thing. And if you can understand that you are a debt slave and that what you do every day is affected, they might not care about chemtrails or fluoride, but when you talk about something that affects their every single day, that might just be the catalyst to trigger them to start looking at all these other things. So my opinion is, if you don't understand that as being fact, could you please remove your cognitively dissonant asses out of my way, because I'm trying to make a difference, okay? And I don't want to hear your opinion unless you've studied that stuff. I don't want to hear an armchair opinion from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, and they try and label me as a conspiracy theorist or whatever else. It's time for them to move out of the way. The people in this room are the people that are pushing the envelope, okay? Chinese proverb, the person who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person that's doing it. Okay, so I'm from Northern Ireland. So if people say, oh, you from Ireland, they think of the top picture, and they say, oh, no, Northern Ireland, and they think about the bottom one. So that's the reality of where I'm from. Right, I've been a very spiritual person for a long, long time, and I used to think about, I hated Northern Ireland, and I left, and I went and travelled to Australia and America and stuff, but home's always home. And I always thought about Northern Ireland in the context of having peace in Northern Ireland. I was sick of police officers and soldiers getting bombed and shot, and I grew up with that. So I come up with that there about 6 years ago. Protestants exist and Catholics exist. That's the word peace. So there is Debt Boy. Okay? Right, so he's drank his fluoride, he's been vaccinated with his mercury, and he's taken all of his drugs, and now he's ready to vote. Okay? And this is Debt Boy. Go on, debt. Right, so he'll keep popping up as we move through here. So Debt Boy, that's everybody in the world, bar none. Unless you're part of the parasites, the elite, whatever. But everybody, basically, you have to get up, you have to work, you have to perform to bring in money. This is a very pivotal photograph for me. This is the hub down in Dublin. They're a great group. They're in Mary Street in Dublin. They're helping people to stay in their homes. This is an entirely different group of people in a different jurisdiction to me. And they've come to the exact same conclusion that I have. They're saying there that the Irish judicial system are the enforcers of banking fraud. Right? So I came to the same conclusion and I arrested a judge. I've been thrown out of my job. I've been through into jail. My whole life just came to a halt for doing the right thing. And they've came to the same conclusion as me. I'm not wrong. The system's wrong. Okay? So there's Edward Snowden. When exposing a crime is treated as committing a crime, you're being ruled by criminals. Right? And the system is everybody thinking that legal means right. And at one time, slavery was legal. Okay, so legal is different from lawful, and it's different from morally correct. I'll get back to slavery if I can get through all of these slides here. So never be afraid to raise your voice for honesty, truth, and compassion against injustice, lying, and greed. If people all over the world would do this, it would change the earth. I thought it was a great quote. Right, this is, I got this video, it's from Zeitgeist, one of the Zeitgeist documentaries. And it's a 2-minute snippet of it, but exactly matches and mirrors the case that I was involved with Santander. And I found this out 4 days after I arrested the judge. So if you bear with me.
In 1969, there was a Minnesota court case involving a man named Jerome Daly, who was challenging the foreclosure of his home by the bank which provided the loan to purchase it. His argument was that the mortgage contract required both parties, being he and the bank, each put up a legitimate form of property for the exchange. In legal language, this is called consideration. Mr. Daly explained that the money was, in fact, not the property of the bank, for it was created out of nothing as soon as the loan agreement was signed. Remember what modern money mechanics stated about loans? What they do when they make loans is to accept promissory notes in exchange for credits. Reserves are unchanged by the loan transactions, but deposit credits constitute new additions to the total deposits of the banking system. In other words, the money doesn't come out of their existing assets. The bank is simply inventing it, putting up nothing of its own, except for a theoretical liability on paper. As the court case progressed, the bank's president, Mr. Morgan, took the stand, and in the judge's personal memorandum, he recalled that the plaintiff, bank's president, admitted that, in combination with the Federal Reserve Bank, did create the money and credit upon its books by bookkeeping entry. The money and credit first came into existence when they created it. Mr. Morgan admitted that no United States law or statute existed which gave him the right to do this. A lawful consideration must exist and be tendered to support the note. The jury found that there was no lawful consideration, and I agree. He also poetically added, "Only God can create something of value out of nothing." And upon this revelation, the court rejected the bank's claim for foreclosure, and Daly kept his home. The implications of this court decision are immense. For every time you borrow money from a bank, whether it is a mortgage loan or a credit card charge, the money given to you is not only counterfeit, it is an illegitimate form of consideration, and hence voids the contract to repay, for the bank never had the money as property to begin with. Unfortunately, such legal realizations are suppressed and ignored, and the game of perpetual wealth transfer and perpetual debt continues.
Okay, how did that sit with you? Does it make sense? Okay, so that's what I think. I mean, I was already in there, but that's what we should be doing there. That's what Iceland has already done. It's fired its government, it chucked all the bankers in the bin, and that's what needs to happen with a whole lot of it. Justin Walker from the UK Colin BCG, he'd be the expert in the Bradbury Pound. The Bradbury Pound is the ultimate solution, I believe, is one of the ultimate solutions. It's a non-debt-based currency, as opposed to the national debt. I'm going to try and cover a lot of things here if I can get them squeezed in, but the Bradbury Pound is very significant. There he is again, there's Debt Boy, debt. There's a program called The Real Hustle, was on between 2004 and 2012. And basically, there's a whole lot of different hustles that they exposed, and I think basically they were teaching people how to hustle other people. But what they were doing was they were showing the cameras and showing us that they would go into any type of scenario. They would go into a restaurant, and they would have some kind of interaction with a member of the public, and that person believed something was happening, but something completely different was happening, and at the end of it, they were done out of money. They were conned, right? But at the time, they had absolutely no idea, and that's what's happening with the mortgage industry. So you have these three individuals here. I'm not going to play this video, but they basically all played different roles to convince people to get them to sign pieces of paper and do X, Y, and Z, but people were being hustled, and they didn't realize it. Okay? So, again, some of these slides might be out of context here. I've struggled to put all these together. There's a guy I just spoke to him this morning there, Mike Grant Sinclair. He gave me permission to use this slide and to speak about him. He's from the Luton area. He had proof that a bank had completely sold his mortgage loan and been paid in full. He had the documentation that was given to him by a Wall Street trader from Goldman Sachs, who also gave him an affidavit, which is absolute gold. So he brought the evidence into one of the local courts here. The judge took it very seriously, instructed the bank to get a senior officer of the judge instructed the bank to get a senior officer to do an affidavit addressing all of these matters. And not only did they not do it, they didn't do an affidavit, they got a statement from a junior banker, and it didn't address any of the issues. So he had basically a royal flush of information that the case should have been struck out straight away in his favour. But the judge stated in the public court to the counsel, "Do you know what will happen if I let Mr. Sinclair win? The entire mortgage market will collapse overnight." And that's where my case is at too, and a whole lot of other people. So the judge then ruled against Mike Grant Sinclair, and he awarded possession of his house to the bank. Right? That's perverting the course of justice. That's criminal behaviour. So the judges are looking at it maybe from the public interest. It's in the public interest for us to keep perpetuating this lie, because if we were to tell them the truth and the whole thing was undermined, the whole system would collapse. As the first speaker this morning said about the fear involved in the system, the economic system collapsing. Well, not only do I believe that we should help to make it collapse. It collapsed in 2008 because of the gambling and the illegality of what the bankers were doing. So there's the movie, The Big Short, demonstrates that. And it's going to happen again. So I would rather that it happened under the weight of the people taking action, which is what I'm going to ask you to do today. So what I'm saying here is that judge, it was misconduct in public office and perverting the course of justice. It's arrestable offences, and he should go to jail. And bar none, everybody's subject to the law. So whenever he asked for an audio recording and the transcript, it came out, and the comments about the mortgage market collapsing overnight weren't on it. So there's a further perverting the course of justice with intent. Okay, so they were tampering with evidence. So since that, Mike's had two very strange things happen to him. His car burst into flames on the motorway, and he was really sick in hospital. He was in intensive care with some kind of disease. That may be a coincidence, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to try and keep my argument about the creation of money and where I was at in my court case. So the creation of money, the first quarterly bulletin in 2014 from the Bank of England, just Google that and go on and download the document. I've got a whole lot of slides here. I'm just going to zip through them. And there's certain key parts which they've highlighted. I'm going to go through. So, okay, it's full of diagrams and and pictures and stuff. And it's saying Robinson Crusoe and Friday had berries and fish, and they traded, and they keep it very, very simple. So, as you can see there, there's three authors there. Okay. So there's high street banks, okay, and then there's the central bank for the UK, which is the Bank of England. Those three individuals worked for the central bank for the UK. If there's a leading authority on the creation of money, it's them. It's not a judge, it's not a barrister, it's not someone with an opinion, it's not a textbook. It's these people. So what they're saying is money, let me see, basically there's three types of money: currency, bank deposits, and reserves. And I'll talk about these in length, but it's very simple. It's just those three. So, but each one of them represents an IOU, as in they have no value, they're worthless, and they're admitting that. But they fluffy it up. At the bottom down here, it's saying money in the modern economy is just a special form of IOU, or in the language of economic accountants, a financial asset. That's too small. I can't see that. Okay. As discussed previously, each IOU is a financial liability for one person and an asset for another. So if you give the bank some money, that's your asset, but it's their liability because they owe you. Okay, so it's the scales of justice. It has to balance. Okay, so I'll explain as I go on. Since 1931, the Bank of England money has been a fiat money. Fiat money or paper money is money that is not convertible into any other asset, such as gold or commodities. It's worthless. The money in your pocket doesn't have any value. As a kid, a saying that we had was, if someone was walking about and they hadn't a clue what they were doing, they were a fart in a trance. Have you ever heard of that? And that's fiat currency, F-I-A-T. People are farts in a trance. They don't understand that this is the reality of it. So currency is made up of banknotes. Currency is the money in your pocket, paper and change. And it's 3% of the money that exists, and the rest of it's digital currency. So the second type of money is banking deposits, and that's the one I'm going to focus on today. And that's the money that's created out of thin air. On a computer, log on, hit digits, and enter, and the money's created. Okay? And the third type of money is central bank reserves. That's savers' money, money that's in the banks that people are saving. And it's against the mechanics of modern banking and the generally accepted accounting practices for banks to lend out money that they've got in reserves. So when anybody in here, particularly most people have mortgages, and everybody has taken out a loan at some stage, when you took out a mortgage and when you took out a loan, the bank check out whether you've got decent credit history and whether you can pay it back. And once that's been, once they're happy with that, with the mortgage, they check out that the house is okay. Once they do that, they make you an offer, okay? You sign the piece of paper, and next thing, the funds are in your account. Where do you think the money came from? It came into your account, and they say, sure, you didn't get the money. Most people, from my experience, believe that there's some big account, some reserve, and they take that money and put it into your account. You pay it back over the duration of the 30 years, 25 years, and then they put it back into this big account, and then they keep the interest. And that's all that banks make. That's the perception of everyone that I've spoken to, that that's what they think. That's what they believe happens in that transaction. Okay? So, but it's a saying here, again, this is from this quarterly report, and this is the Bank of England saying this. Bank deposits are created by commercial banks themselves. They're created. Money today is a form of debt, but it's a special kind of debt that is accepted as the medium of exchange and economy. Move on. Again, this is the second part here. This is the important part here. Whenever a bank makes a loan, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit in the borrower's bank account, thereby creating new money. Right? So that, even that one thing there, I took that. There's the leading authority in the UK saying banks don't lend money, they create it. Okay? But I've got terms and conditions from Santander's mortgage. And it says in there, lender, borrower, money, and it uses all these words. They imply in the terms and conditions that they're going to lend you money. But the Bank of England here is clearly saying that they don't lend you money, they create it, they pull it out of the thin air. So either the Bank of England is telling lies or Santander is telling lies. So I was like, why didn't you swan off and find out amongst yourselves and get back to me when you've decided it? Right, one common misconception is that banks act as intermediaries, lending out deposits that savers place with them. Again, I'm just going through this just to verify what I'm saying, the Bank of England, what their position is. This article explains how rather than banks lending out deposits that's placed with them, the act of lending creates the deposit. Whenever the bank gives you the offer, when you sign the offer, in that moment you create the money. The money didn't exist prior to you signing that. So if you're signing a contract, is that something they should be open and transparent about? Or are they misleading you? Are the terms and conditions of your mortgage a fraudulent misrepresentation in order to dupe you into signing a contract that they can then hold over you and then take your house off you if they so decide? There he is. Dead boy, dead. Okay, so there's Abbey National Standard Mortgage Conditions. So again, I'm just going to go in here. They take great care to define each different word and what it means. Okay? So in there, it says there, offer means a document known as a mortgage offer, which contains or offer to lend you money under the mortgage documents. Is that a lie? Is there anybody here who doesn't follow that that's a lie? And it clearly is. So the mortgage conditions are untruthful. And what that should say is, our offer is, we will offer to facilitate credit. We've got a magic license that allows us to create money out of thin air. And if you sign this piece of paper, it allows us to create the money out of thin air, which we will then facilitate to you. It doesn't say that. It misleads you. So they're talking about the security of your mortgage deeds and the money that you owe us. So if the Santander didn't lend me money, why do I owe them money? If they created it out of thin air, that's what consideration was in the video earlier. Again, I've just done a few snapshots here. There's the power of attorney. So every terms and conditions for a bank has a power of attorney. That's not in line with the Power of Attorney Act 1971. A power of attorney is an extremely powerful document, and once you sign it, and you have to get witnesses and all to do it. If I was crazy enough to give Ian Crane my power of attorney, once it's signed and done properly, he can go out and take out credit cards. He can go and sign up to stuff. He can act as if he's me. So it's for people who are lying on their deathbeds or they're somehow they can't fend for themselves. A power of attorney is very powerful. They sort of scribble it in the terms and conditions, and they act. So they use it to forge your signature, to create financial instruments, to do all this nefarious stuff in the background that you have no idea what's going on. The banks are creaming the money in. They're making the value of your house at least 2 to 3 times. I'm going to show you proof of it in a second. Okay. So this is the brainwashing aspect of it here. Everywhere you go, do you know when you're listening to the radio, you know the wee douches that do the small print talking, and your home may be repossessed if you don't keep up payments. So it's put into your brain that in some way, in a civilized society, that is any way remotely normal. People just accept it. You know, one of those things, I lost the house to the bank, and they get up and they move on. That is absolutely, when you start looking at these things, that there is them brainwashing you, and I start getting cross when I think about it. Securitization. I'm going to cover a lot of subjects, and I'm hoping to pull it together at the end. I say I'm not a professional speaker. I'll try my best to get across. So securitization is banks have hundreds of thousands of mortgages. So they would take, say, 1,000 mortgages, package them together, give it a AAA rating, and then they sell it to an investor. Right? In the past, HSBC was found their investors were the FARC guerrillas from South America, the drug dealers. So that was money laundering. You have all these people with all this dirty money, and they're the investors. So there's a whole money laundering aspect to it as well. But banks take 1,000 mortgages, package them up, and sell them to an investor. So in the transaction that you won't have access to, I've got the documents for my mortgage. The bank then becomes a servicing agent. So what happens is the 1,000 people give their money every month, and the bank gives it to the investor. And that's what the bank does. So whenever they securitized the mortgage, the bank sold all the rights to the mortgage to the investor and got paid the full amount of the mortgage into their account. So they've been paid in full for all 1,000 mortgages, even though they didn't lend you money in the first place. So they weren't out anything, and now they're 100% up. So, and then they sign this agreement to be a servicing agent, and they take the money every month. And they will pretend that they still own the house. They'll pretend that they're still dealing with your mortgage, but they're just a servicing agent. And banks deny that, and they start claiming it's commercially sensitive documents. So I went onto an investor website, and I found them advertising what they'd done, and I downloaded all the documents. Okay, so now if I do it myself, that'll disappear. So, so it's like if you've got a caravan and you put it online to sell it. Once you sell it and you've received the money, you have no more control over that caravan, and you have no more say in it. But when banks do that, they believe that they still get a say in the property. So the history of my case was that in 2008, me and young Maxine took out a mortgage. In 2010, the deal ended, and our payments more than doubled. And as a family, a normal working family, we couldn't afford to make the payments, but I did for a full calendar year. And during that full calendar year, I researched this stuff. I went up and down to Dublin, went to different groups, and I found out all this information that at the time I thought was conspiracy theory, but now I know it's fact. So in 2011, get into arrears and litigation. We were at the stage we couldn't afford to put oil in our tank. We had to buy the cheapest food, and our 2 daughters, we couldn't afford to buy them clothes. And I was working 40 to 60 hours a week as a police officer in a seemingly really good job. And I couldn't hold things together. I don't smoke, I don't drink. I'm just a family man. And if I was struggling, what were other people doing? What were they going through? So I couldn't afford a solicitor, and I've got a healthy lack of trust in that profession. So I represented myself, and I struggled, and basically I got there. But in Santander ultimately got a repossession order for our house. The judge wouldn't listen to one thing I was saying in the master's court. I appealed the decision, and in September 2013, I got the order overturned, and I won my house back. And the reason was Santander told lies in their affidavits. They denied securitization. They denied having done it. And then eventually they had to fess up and say, okay, well, we have done it, but we've only done it we only sort of half sold it for a small period of time. And again, that was more lies. So 4 weeks after it, Santander started saying, after I won the house back, they sent a very threatening letter saying that after the expiration of 7 days, Santander UK PLC will enter into and take control of said premises. And I thought, have I mucked up? Have I done something wrong? And my solar plexus, just this fear. I thought I'd messed up. But it turns out that's just a generic letter they send to everyone. And I believe that it's done in order to create fear. Because if you send out 100 letters like that, you've got 10 people coming up and handing in the keys because they just can't cope with it. So I took out a High Court injunction against them because we were going away on a holiday for a week to try and sort of deal with the stress. And it turned out it was the first time that anyone took a High Court injunction against Santander in the UK. They subsequently breached it 11 times by sending me all these letters and stuff. But eventually what happened out of that was they changed the form. They changed the letter they send out to a lot softer one and not as scary. So for me, it was a win. I lost the breach, didn't have to pay costs, and they had to change the form. So I was happy with that. Subsequently, again, it's another big topic I could talk about, but a private public place. The Human Rights Act, your Article 6 right to a fair trial is in a public place, right? So every repossession that's happened in Northern Ireland since at least 1998, when the human rights were enshrined, every one of them was held in a private chambers. So they're taking people into a private room. There's no audio recording. So what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. They can say whatever they want happened in that room. If you weren't present, if nobody was there to facilitate you, then they can say what they want. So I challenged that. I challenged the Lord Chief Justice in Northern Ireland and told him, if you didn't realise what you're doing, you're breaching everybody's human rights by repossessing houses in that room, and you need to stop. There's a public master's court downstairs, and you need to start using that. And what I'm saying is that every repossession in Northern Ireland since 1998 is void or voidable. They broke the law. What they're doing is unlawful, and there's no excuse for that. So basically, I won the house back in 2013. In December 14, Santander recommenced proceedings. I challenged them in a private public place. That just kicked the can down the road. So in the summer of 2015, the listings document in a second I'm going to show you, but I basically was able to prove Santander didn't lend me any money, which I'm certain of, and I can prove they've been paid at least twice in full. Okay, I've got documentary evidence. So many times they have to be paid before they're going to stop coming and try and throw me and my kids out in the street, my wife and kids. It's not good enough. So I made an application to strike out their case based upon at about 15 reasons, 15 solid, well-researched reasons why they couldn't take my house. And I also put in 6 committal applications. I wanted to put the CEO of Santander and barristers and solicitors and anyone who tried to screw me over, I tried to put them in jail. Because that's what they need to be. So I put in the committal applications, and all of a sudden my case was cherry-picked from the Chancery list by the second highest judge in Northern Ireland. So there's 30 cases that day. He took my case out and took it downstairs into the Queen's Bench, and I got the special treatment. And he goes, Mr. Carlin, there's no summons before me. I see these orders for committal, but there's no summons, so I can't do anything, let's move on. And I asked him for some procedural advice. And he goes, I'm not here to give legal advice, let's move on. He just quashed it. I made a procedural, I'm not, we do make mistakes. I tried my best, but that didn't work. But he just swiftly moved on. I spent 3 days in September putting my case to the judge. On day number 1, he spoke over the top of me. He cut me off in mid-sentence. He took me back on subjects I talked about 5 minutes ago, and then he talked about something else. And by the end of 3 hours, I was more mentally drained than I've ever been in my life, and I lost my whole flow of my thought. So I sent him an email, and I said, by the way, here's how you treated me the last day. It's not good enough. And the fact that you're only going to give me 1 hour next week for the second part of the hearing, I don't accept. There won't be a rush to justice in my case. So if you can't deal with it, then get me another judge that does have the time. And basically, I politely told him to watch how he was speaking to me, and that I had my human rights, my Article 6 right to fair trial, couldn't be infringed by him. So on day 2, he was very polite and he definitely worked with me. But over them first, on day 2, he basically asked me along more from telling me, we're only going to give you 1 more hour. And then on day 2, he says, how much time do you want? How much time do you want? And I says, as long as I want. Here. And he goes, no, Mr. Carlin. He says, how much do you think so we can sort of put you in? Is it 3 hours, 4 hours? And I said, well, probably about 3 hours. So we set it on for the last day. So I'm just doing a timeline here. So that was September. So then the case was adjourned. I spoke for 3 days. I hit him with 15 very solid reasons why Santander have no claim and why the case should be struck out. And what I done was, I'll move on here 1 second, sorry. Right. This is the letter from Santander that basically admitted that they told lies in my case. Okay. So paragraph 2 there, they're saying that they've taken further instructions from the plaintiff. So we took instructions the first time, and that was just lies. So now we've took further instructions on whether the mortgage was ever securitized, and she's instructed by Amaya Mazzera, who's the senior head of Treasury Legal, that the title to the mortgage and its rights were transferred, sold, assigned, securitized by Santander to a sister company on 2 specific dates. Right, so it's September 2010 and December 2011. Okay, so remember those 2 dates, 2 specific dates. Hey, debt boy. So that if you look up the Northern Ireland courts, that's the actual reference there when I won my case. That's the neutral citation and stuff. And basically, when the judge was summing up, what he said was that basically he told the banks off and made new rules on how they had to do affidavits. And they had to be warned, you better not tell any lies or you could go to jail. That's basically what he's saying there. CFR, Cleaver, Fulton Rankin, done a thing. If you Google Santander Carlin, there's a whole lot of stuff comes up. But what they're openly saying here, this legal firm is saying that if someone tells an affidavit deliberately containing untrue information with the intent of misleading the court, then the person that writes it is liable to be found guilty of perjury under the Perjury Northern Ireland Order, and it's 7 years in jail or a fine. Okay. Hey. Bzzz. Okay, there you go. So this is a guy, Ken Smullen, on, you can still hear me, yes? Yeah. Okay, there. So Ken Smullen, there's a whole lot of people in Ireland are very passionately fighting against banks and trying to help families for the human element of this. And he's made a good point here. There's people every day of the week hide behind curtains. There's a shame attached to debt, even though the banks are duping everybody. But there's this shame, people don't want to come out. So I feel very exposed by coming up here and I'm putting everything I've got on the line, and I'm not scared to do it because of this whole thing, because we have to be open and transparent, or else that's how the banks thrive, picking on each person individually one at a time, and people don't talk, they don't come out and talk to each other. So again, this is a listings document, and it gives my account number and name. I haven't put the full document up because it gives me address and stuff on it, so I've just taken screen grabs, but it's called a listings document. It's very similar to a statement from a bank, but it also gives a 3-letter code, a transaction code, which explains what happened to the money, so it's better than a statement. So there's mine there. So if you can see, the pointy thing, so there's the 19th of September. Again, that date keeps coming up. 19th of September 2008, me and wifey allegedly borrowed 192 grand to buy our house. Right, and this is all the payments we've made. The right-hand column there, you see the balance. So I owe 192 grand to the bank, and the balance continues the same because it's an interest-only mortgage. And there's my name there, okay? And this is when, as a police officer, when I seen evidence that the bank had been paid, this was a turning point for me. So on the 28th of the 9th, remember the 2 dates I told you about? So I got this afterwards. On the date that they securitized my mortgage, there's a mysterious payment for 192 grand coming into my account. And what's the balance? If your bill's paid, your bill's paid. If you go to a restaurant, you're sitting eating food, and your buddy walks past the window, it goes into the manager and goes, listen, I'll pay for their bill. Right? It doesn't matter who pays the bill. If it's paid, it's paid. My mortgage balance is paid. Thank you very much, Mr. Santander. You just paid off my bills. But it goes on, okay? But then on the same date as page 2, see the code CST and CSF. I'll get to them in a second. But on the same day, there's another mysterious transaction for 192 grand going out of my account, and the balance is back to what it was just before, as if it didn't happen. Now, as soon as I brought this into court, this listings document, and just hit them in the face with it, all of a sudden, there was about 5 other people got the same documents. Get rid of it. But 5 or 6 other people I know have the listings document. Now, if anyone does a subject access request to Santander, a freedom of information, a data protection request, they don't get this document. And you wonder why. So they're suppressing documents, and that's a breach of the Data Protection Act. Okay? So anyway, I have my document. There, it's there. So the payment comes in, disappears out the same day. Then, again, remember the 2 dates I talked about? On the second date, there's another payment for 192 grand in my account. The balance goes down to £2,500, which would be zero but for the interest, some kind of interest rates. And then very same day, the payment goes back out. So Santander lost their case to me for telling lies in their affidavits. Then they started a brand new hearing and a brand new affidavit from someone. And the first, it goes, I've been warned not to tell lies, and I've checked the whole system, and this is an accurate reflection of Mr. Carlin's mortgage. Nowhere does it mention 2 mysterious payments for 192 grand. So Santander are willfully misleading the court and hiding these payments, which are directly connected to the reason why I won my case in the first place. Are they relevant points? Judge didn't think so. Santander didn't think so. So that's when I start getting cross. So again, all these miscellaneous third party, somebody get 4.5 grand. I don't know who they were. There's another 4.5 grand. TAR is another one. TAR there. So basically a transfer of money to arrears. They're taking money off your interest, and that's called capitalisation, which is, again, there's a big case in Northern Ireland, Bank of Scotland versus Ray. Every Bank of Scotland case in Northern Ireland in the UK has been suspended because of double dipping. They're taking money and you pay your interest every month on the amount of money you borrowed. So if the amount of money you owe goes up every month, the amount of interest you pay goes up also. So if they start loading money on here, you're paying even more interest every month. And then the pile just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's called capitalisation. And so that's what the banks are at as well. So that's another significant point. So this is just the list of the codes and what they mean. And there you have there is CSF and CST, capital securitized from and capital securitized to. So the money comes in and it goes back out again. Where's the mysterious payments coming from? Santander says they're an internal audit and there's nothing for me to worry about. Nothing to see here, Bob. Okay, elements of a contract. Contract law is very easy. There's 7 points. I couldn't get the perfect slide to put it on. So there's an offer. The bank makes you an offer and you accept it, right? There has to be a genuine agreement and a meeting of the minds. It has to be open and transparent, nothing hidden, no surprises, and both people have to know what's happening in the full transaction. Otherwise, as it said there, agreements can be destroyed by fraud, misrepresentation, mistake, duress, or undue influence. The banks have lied in all of the terms and conditions. Every mortgage and every loan that has occurred are null and void because they've told lies. They've misled the people. They've misrepresented. Wasn't me. Consideration, the video we played earlier on, they talked about illegitimate consideration. You're promising to go out and work for 25, 30 years to pay off a mortgage. Blood, sweat, and tears. That's what you're bringing to the party. The bank's lending you money, right? So if the bank didn't lend you money, then it's a false consideration. They duped you. They told lies in order to get you to sign up to something. You're going to be a slave for 30 years. So they're the most important ones there. So it's offer acceptance, meeting of the minds, and the consideration. I'll not get into the rest of them there, but that's the most important ones. Hey, that boy. Right. So I've already sort of covered that. That's basically all the stuff that I hit the judge with in September 2015. I didn't miss and hit the wall. I nailed every subject. I was very articulate. When he asked me about the creation of money, he bounced me back and forth, and I knew it inside out. And then I told the judge, I says, look, there's no one in this courtroom, including the judge, who has the relevant qualifications to be able to speak about the creation of money. I'm saying that the banks don't create, or they create money out of thin air. The Bank of England's saying that. And if you doubt what I'm saying, this has to be a fact in the case. And if anybody wants to challenge that point, I want to subpoena those 3 people, the 3 authors, and we'll get them in here and they can give testimony. But aside from that, Santander didn't lend me money, so therefore they have no claim. Why are they bringing me into court to try and steal my house when they didn't lend me money? It's a fraudulent claim. So I absolutely nailed all the points. I called this the Holy Trinity. There's legislation. I basically took 3 different parts of legislation that people had worked with me and I put them together. So you can see there that it's England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. It's from the legislation.gov. Banker's Book of Evidence, 1879. Still hasn't been repealed. Section 7 says, on the application of any party to legal proceedings, a court or judge may order that such a party be at liberty to inspect the banker's books. So I'm saying to Santander, you didn't lend me money, and I want the judge to order them to produce the books. And either, if they, what I said to the judge was, if they produce the books, it will either show that I'm a nunu, I don't know what I'm talking about, and then if they can provide proof that they lent me money, I will pay them back everything I owe. But otherwise, it'll prove that they didn't lend me money, and therefore you can strike the case out. Either way, the case ends today. That makes sense. It just cuts out all the crap and gets to the heart of the matter. So he didn't listen to me on day one, so I then had to back it up with these other two pieces of legislation. Interpretation Act 1954, Northern Ireland. There's one for England as well. Section 4 says, every act should be a public act, and it shall be judicially noticed as such. Judges can't ignore legislation. That's what that says, okay? And then there's this is in Bailey, it's a stated case, it's the Julius versus the Bishop of Oxford. It's John Hurst gave me this, thank you, John. And basically what it says is that in legislation, if it says may anywhere, may means must. A judge may do this. If the judge acting is to enforce someone's rights, legal rights, they're compelled to do it. So you can see it there. Let me see, for where a statute directs the doing of a thing for the sake of justice or the public good, the word may is the same as the word shall. I'll not bore you with it. Julius versus the Bishop of Oxford and ex parte lives, they stated cases say may means must. So when I go back to, a judge may order the bank to produce the books. I told the judge, you're compelled to. You must tell them to do it. So I said, so basically what I said to the judge was, I gave him 15 reasons to allow me to win. But I says, they had failed on the land registry. Santander's names aren't my deeds. It's Abbey National. Abbey National, if you go to Company's House, is a dissolved company. They don't exist anymore. So therefore, nobody owns my house. Santander have got the deeds, but their name's not on it. And it's only the owner of a registered charge that can take you to court. So they're in breach of the land registry rules, which is a criminal offence too, if I'm not mistaken. So of all the 15 reasons why I gave Santander to let me win, or the judge to let me win, the one I thought he would go for was the land registration. And it's tax evasion. They didn't register because it costs them money and time and effort to do it. And it's basically, they have to pay taxes and stuff. It's tax evasion. So that's the reason why I thought I was going to win. But I contemplated what will happen if he doesn't let me win. And I came to the conclusion, and I know I'm correct, if he found in favour of Santander without telling him to produce the proof, then he's committing criminal offences. Right? So in the same way, as a police officer, when I went outside nightclubs at night, you can see someone messing about and you can go into the ward and say, listen, if you keep doing this, you could be committing disorderly behaviour and I'll have to arrest you. I can't predetermine his actions. So I didn't go to that's what I'm correcting you in, I didn't go to the court with the intention of arresting the judge. I weighed up what I would have to do, or what, in those circumstances, what would I have to do? And I weighed up the whole thing, I risk assessed everything, but I honestly believed that he wouldn't do it because I'd done my homework and I nailed him in the corner where he had to either find in favour of me or commit a crime. I'm sorry if anybody's offended by this. That was in September 2015. This is Steps on Eden. So he was in a car crash 3 days before Christmas. He's now brain injured, lying in a hospital. So as a family, we had to cope and deal with that. So I'll just move on. This is Aidan today. So if anybody's getting any input on, I know there's a lot of holistic stuff to try and help us, but as a family, you're trying to fight a legal fight, but then life throws you a curveball, and so there he is, Lord Justice Gillen. So the stuff was going on with me and Maxine and Aidan, and that whole thing took over. And then I received a letter to say I was back in court. But I'd already set that ball rolling. So the whole thing with Aidan was in the background. Whenever he found against me, I didn't react. When he found against me, I'd already done my homework, and I thought, right, what in that moment, what do I believe he's done in that moment? Okay? And I believed that he had committed a criminal offence. I didn't have a chip on my shoulder. I didn't abuse my position as a police officer, and I wasn't trying to prove a point. I didn't predetermine his actions. He did. So I didn't act out of stress, although I'm stressed at the high health. I've got superhuman coping strategies. I didn't act out of stress. I didn't have a momentary mental anguish. I'd given him the 15 reasons, and he was compelled to produce the books, and he chose not to do so. It was against the rules of natural justice to allow Santander to bring a fraudulent claim against us without proving their claim actually existed. His job, I know my role as a police officer, I have a job that I have to uphold to the public. And if I don't do it, I'm misconducting public office, and I'll be held accountable. A judge is there to give justice. He's there to apply legislation. And if he doesn't do it, he needs to be arrested. And I'm not scared to do it. The 5 offences I arrested him for, it wasn't just a token arrest. It was 5 genuine reasons. So it's misconduct in public office and malfeasance, which is pretty much he didn't do his job. He had to apply legislation. He had to do certain things, and he didn't do it. The Fraud Act 2006, so there's Section 3 of the Fraud Act and Section 4, and aiding and abetting the theft of my home. Right, so misconduct in public office is triable only in indictment. It carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. It's an offence confined to those who are in public office and is committed when the office holder acts or fails to act in a way that constitutes a breach of those duties. From what I've told you, does that apply? It does. It exactly mirrors it. Malfeasance. It says there that the code of conduct requires is that neither the authority or officers knowingly penalise, charge or enforce matters which are defective or without legal substance. He found against me without producing documents that would prove my innocence. Right, so misfeasance in there. Fraud Act 2006, England, Scotland, Wales. England, Wales, Northern Ireland. So fraud by failing to disclose information. So if a person is in breach of this section, if he dishonestly fails to disclose to another person information which he's under a legal duty to disclose, does that match? Yes, it does. And he intends by failing to disclose that information to make a gain for himself or cause a loss to another. Does that exactly match the situation? If he had a duty to disclose documents, the banker's books, which would prove my innocence and therefore save my house, he didn't do that. He committed Section 3 of the Fraud Act. Section 4 of the Fraud Act, a person in breach of this section, if he occupies a position in which he's expected to safeguard or not act against the financial interests of another person. You couldn't write this. This is exactly what happened. He dishonestly abuses that position, and I assert that he did. I allege that he did, and that he intends, by means of the abuse of that position, to make a gain for himself or cause a loss to another, or expose the other to a risk of loss. I arrested him for those 2 offences, and then aiding and abetting the theft of my house. Did I pluck them out of my bum? You know, I thought about it, and I thought, he can't do that because, you know, it's like me saying to someone, if you smash him in the face with a bottle, I'm going to arrest you. You know, if he done what he done, and I sent him an email in September telling him, if you find against me and you don't produce the books, then you're committing a criminal offence. So I sent him an email, I've got a read receipt for it. And then there's the definition for theft. So, but you can't steal a house. That's the law. You can't steal a house because it's stuck to the ground. But you can steal the person's financial interest in it and the money that's involved. You can steal their use of it. Hey, debt boy. So the office of constable, I went and looked at, as a constable in these positions, where do I stand? Where am I coming from? So this is a document from it's an English one. It's from Jan Berry. She was a peeler of 30 years from the Police Federation. Again, it's just a snippet here. So the answer is talking about police. The answer is simple. It's about integrity, impartiality, and most importantly, political independence. It's the tiebreaker and the ultimate check and balance in our democracy to protect against tyrannical abuse of power. Constables are individual units who come together for a common aim. They're not employees, they're individual units who can make individual decision-making based upon their own logic, intellect, integrity, everything. They have to weigh everything up, and they act according to the information they have, and they have to justify what they've done. No one else can de-arrest someone you've arrested and no one can tell you not to arrest, and they can't tell you to arrest. Once you're attested as a constable, you make the decision. You make your oath to uphold, to protect, to prevent and detect crime, and so I haven't put up the PSNI oath. Let's see here, up here. So the independent office of constable operates within and is accountable to the rule of law. I'm not answerable to judges, I'm answerable to the rule of law. That's my role as a constable. The rule of law is the principle that no one is above the law. Lord Justice Gillen is not above the law. He committed crimes, and I arrested him. And now I've been fired, I've been put in jail, and I've been put in through the mince machine. Perhaps the most important application of the rule of law is the principle that the government authority is legitimately exercised only in accordance with written, publicly disclosed laws. The law must be accessible, intelligible, clear, predictable, and must apply equally to all. This is someone looking at a broad look at what a constable is, and I acted within that the entire time. We skip that one. So, the Police Service in Northern Ireland, my ex-employers. So, on the 12th of January this year, the police were called at my request. I arrested the judge. So, when the judge found against me, I believed he committed a crime. I stood up and held up my warrant card, and I told him, I'm a police constable, I'm a constable in the Police Service in Northern Ireland, and I'm now arresting you for 5 offences. I told him the 5 offences, and I read him his rights, his Article 3 caution. Okay? I asked for someone to ring the police to come to assist me with my arrest. The police arrived. The 2 constables there spoke to me. They were 100% very professional. They didn't want to make the decision. It was above their head. So the sergeants arrived. They came in and said to me, look, what's going on here? And after about 15 seconds of me trying to explain, they said, look, let's just go outside. And I says, no, the judge that I've arrested is behind that door, and you're here to assist me. So 3 times they asked me to move, and when I refused, they instructed the constables to arrest me for a jumped-up assault charge. Right? So if I go up to you like this, but don't hit you, it's a technical common assault. If you felt in fear you were going to be assaulted, it's still an assault. So they said I assaulted the judge and tipstaff. I was professional and calm the whole way through. So they arrested me and took me outside, went to Musgrave Street custody suite, and while I was there, they said to me, the judge has requested that you're brought over to the courts. So I said to them, I said, are you talking about the judge that I arrested? And they said, yes. And I said, what? I said, where's the paperwork? If a judge wants me to move from a PACE custody suite, I must have a summons or a warrant or some piece of paper that's signed by a judge. Where's it at? We don't have it. And I says, well then, according to PACE, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1989 is the bread and butter that all the police in the UK operate to. And they were just throwing PACE in the bin and just, we have a local agreement. And they haven't applied PACE throughout this. So if my arrest of the judge wasn't lawful, then why is any arrest in the United Kingdom of any individual or person or human being, why is that lawful? It applies to all or it applies to none. So they wouldn't give me any paperwork. And I said, it's Guy Taylor. Basically, PACE would say that if a person is in a custody suite, that they're only released, they're basically released without charge. There's no evidence against you, you're free to go. You have no paperwork. You're released on police bail. You must sign here, you must come back in 3 weeks to be interviewed. If you don't come back, we're going to arrest you again. But you're given a piece of paper. Or you're charged to court. We've interviewed you, there's enough evidence to charge you to court, we're going to charge you and we're going to drive you around the minibus round to the court. Right? So that you're given charge papers. And the last one is if you're transferred to prison. There's no circumstances that I'm aware of that someone can leave a custody suite without a piece of paper. So what I'm saying is that I told them, I'm not leaving here. If you want to take me away, you have to use force. So they put their hands on my back and they pushed me out the door gently, but they used force. So they used force to move me against my will and take me in a car. Guess what that defines? Kidnap. Right? If someone bundles you in the back of your car against your will, it's kidnap. Just because they're wearing a police uniform doesn't make a difference. So what I said was, the judge had rang the police and arranged for me to be removed against PACE. The PSNI, I'm saying, therefore conspired with the judge to kidnap me. Do you get that logic? Right, if the rules apply to everybody. So I explained to the sergeant at the desk, I says, you can't remove me from a PACE custody suite at the will of a judge who I've arrested. This is just crazy. Guy Taylor said this, what the difference between a bailiff and a burglar is paperwork. They both kick in your front door, they both take your TV. One's a crime and the other one's legal because they've got paperwork. So if they kidnapped me, but they had a piece of paper, then that negates it's not a crime because of a piece of paper. And in the absence of a piece of paper, it's a crime. So I'm saying that the PSNI kidnapped me and brought me around to a court. Okay? Since this entire thing happened, the police arrested me, but the Ombudsman for Northern Ireland interviewed me. The PSNI have never officially spoke to me since this happened. So I've been dismissed, and the police haven't even had the decency to take a statement from a constable of 10 years in relation to serious allegations about a senior judge in Northern Ireland. They haven't even asked me my opinion. I've just been rushed out of the job. And the realisation is that basically when I went against the system and done something which was highly unusual, but I've got the grounds and necessity for it and I stand over that. Some people will maybe be of the opinion, but it's not that I was so far off the mark. I was, people can argue the minutiae of it, but I was on the ball with it. So they suspended me in the 14th of January. When I was in court the day I arrested the judge, I was in a suit. The judge committed a crime. I therefore brought myself on duty and acted, and that's the code of ethics. I have to do that. If you don't act when a crime's happening in front of you, you're 24 hours on duty. And if a crime happens, you're duty bound to act. I brought myself on duty and arrested the judge. Then they arrested me, and they put me on trial for having done my job as a police officer. So the next day when I was on trial, I turned up in my uniform. You're putting me on trial as a police officer, here I'm dressed as one. So then the next day, the police suspended me and took all my clothes off me. Or my uniform, man. So then I was in a separate issue with a medical retirement. I had a lower back injury. And I was supposed to go for a medical, and I thought the police were going to try and fast forward me out of the police because this was a bit of embarrassment for them. So I pulled out of that process, and I gave them a return to work line from the 25th of January. They stopped my wages then, and I haven't been paid since. Right? I haven't had a penny, so... and it's never been reinstated since that time. They basically ignored everything, ignored their duties to me as a constable. They just threw me, basically, as I said, threw into the mince machine. I didn't expect to be paid while I was in jail, but certainly before it and after it, I'm entitled to it. This is when I'm not saying I would do that there, but that's Chevy Chase. That's what he does when he drives past his work on his day off. So the trial occurred in January and February 2016. I wasn't entitled. They said I wasn't entitled under any circumstances was I allowed a jury trial. Right? So I'm saying I arrested a judge, and the judge who's going to preside over my proceedings is his mucker, his golfing buddy. They're on the Privy Council together. Is there a conflict of interest? Is it, what I said was the judges had a vested interest in the outcome, so I couldn't possibly get a fair trial in Northern Ireland from a Northern Ireland judge. I demand a jury. In these circumstances, I'm alleging criminal behaviour of the judges, and I demand a jury trial. The whole thing was just one thing after another. None of my rights were upheld. There was errors of fact, law, and procedure, which I can document. But again, I'm still trying to get back to myself after 6 weeks in jail, They were just plain wrong, and nothing that I raised was listened to or acknowledged. It was a sham, and it was a mistrial. My details were made very public by the courts. They'd done press releases, name, the street I lived on, and what I did for a living in the context of Northern Ireland, right? It was around the time of the Easter Rising anniversary, so the Republicans, the IRA, were very, a heightened state, and someone was going to be killed over the Easter holidays. It was either going to be a police officer or a prison officer. They were happy to put my details in the public and out me, and 2 weeks later, a prison officer was blown up. Adrian Ismay. And I actually wrote a letter to his wife and his kids from prison, giving me condolences. I don't know if she ever got it, so if she's ever watching this video, I'd like her to contact me. But it was an absolute sin. The bomb that was under his car, I believe, was destined for me, because the police and courts were criminally negligent with my security. telling everybody who would want to kill a police officer exactly where I live. Everything but my house number and my photograph. So basically I was found guilty on the last day of court and I was given a 3-month sentence. He could have given me a suspended sentence, which would have ended my career anyway, but they wanted to make an example of me. Don't ever step up and go against the system. Don't ever arrest a judge or don't ever think about it. So, but they said, if you apologise, we'll only give you 28 days. Never has anyone in the history of ever been convicted of a crime and said, if you say sorry, we'll give you time off. So they wanted me to say sorry so that it would vindicate what they did. I never apologised. I done my full time. So basically that's what I grew up looking at, and I hate it, and it's such a sin, and it's rest in peace, Adrian Ismay. He was a good man. So this is Maghaberry Prison. That's where I was at and spent my 6 weeks. There was people came to inspect the prisons, and Maghaberry they deemed to be in line with Victorian times. They said a list of all the things that was wrong with the prison, and what they said was, Mr. Harwick says Maghaberry Prison is the most dangerous prison I've ever been in. It's like something at the Charles Dickens place, right? The police and the courts announced who I was, what I did for a living, and then put me into what they deemed to be the most dangerous prison in Northern Ireland and the UK. And from the minute I went in, black bastard, he's fucking pillar, he's rubber. And I got it. They were throwing bottles at the window I was in. They were threatening to stab me, slash me, and scald me. And that's how they'll get you in prison. They'll go to one of them hot water geysers, hot water, and they'll come up and they'll throw it into your face. And that's what I was in that position for 6 weeks. You know, it's like coming out of a nightclub and there's a group of people and you're just waiting for a punch in the head. It's like being in that position for 6 weeks. The only time you're safe is when the door's shut. But when you're shut off, and it was a strange experience for me. I never thought I would experience it. So I was put in jail very publicly. Let me see. I was in my cell 23 hours a day because they come in and says, do you want to go out they open the door and says, do you want to go out to the yard? And I was like, are you having a giraffe? Like, you know, if I have a life expectancy of 30 seconds if I go out there. The fact that Aidan was in hospital and Maxine had to go up and down to the hospital every day to care for Aidan, and then her husband was in jail, was never considered by the judge. They didn't even consider that, and it's just, the whole thing it's shocking. Here's a famous Carlin, right? Governments don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. That's against their interests. They only want obedient workers and people who are smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept it. Okay? I'm going to show you, again, how I'm going for time, Ian? 5 minutes, right. Basically, this is a video here. It's a young fellow with red hair. It's called Boy in a Band. He's talking about his frustration about the education system. It doesn't teach you what mortgages are, what money is, what taxes are, what legislation is. It teaches you about Henry VIII and the many wives he had. And all this useless stuff were dumbed down on purpose. And that's a very good one.
I wasn't taught how to get a job, but I can remember dissecting a frog. I wasn't taught how to pay tax, but I know loads about Shakespeare's classics. I was never taught how to vote. They devoted that time to defining isotopes. I wasn't taught how to look after my health, but mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Never spent a lesson on current events. Instead, I studied the old American West. I was never taught what laws there are. I was never taught what laws there are. Let me repeat, I was not taught the laws for the country I live in, but I know how Henry VIII killed his women. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Glad that's in my head instead of financial advice. I was shown the wavelengths of different hues of light, but I was never taught my human rights. Apparently there's 30. Do you know them? I don't. Why the hell can't we both recite them by rote? I know igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks, yet I don't know squat about trading stocks or how money works at all. Where does it come from? How does the thing that motivates the world function? Not taught to budget and disperse my earnings. I was too busy there rehearsing cursive. Didn't learn how much it costs to raise a kid and what an affidavit is, but I spent days on what the quadratic equation is. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac IC over 2A. That's insane, that's absolutely insane. They made me learn that over basic first aid, or how to recognize the most deadly mental disorders or diseases with preventable causes, or how to buy a house with a mortgage if I could afford it, because abstract maths was deemed more important than advice that would literally save thousands of lives. But it's cool, because now I could tell you if the number of unnecessary deaths caused by that choice was prime. Never taught present-day practical medicines, but I was told what the ancient Hippocratic method is. I've got a headache, the pain is ceaseless, what should I take? Maybe try some leeches? Could we discuss domestic abuse and get the facts, or how to help my depressed friend with a mental state? No, but learn mental maths, because you won't have a calculator with you every day. They say it's not the kids, the parents are the problem. Then if you taught the kids to parent, that's the problem solved then. All this advice about using a condom, but not for when you actually have a kid when you want one. I'm only fluent in this language, for serious, the rest of the world speaks too. Do you think I'm an idiot? I chose the solar over the political system, so like a typical citizen now I don't know what I'm voting on, which policies exist or how to make them change. Mais oui, je parle un peu de français. So at 18 I was expected to elect a representative for a system I had never ever been presented with. But I won't take it. I'll tell everyone my childhood was wasted. I'll share it everywhere how I was educated, and insist these pointless things don't stay in school.
The Earth debt is 233.3 trillion. Who do we owe it to? The guy this morning says, the Bank of International Settlements is the Rothschilds. It's the World Bank. They're holding us all to ransom. Right? Britain's trillion pound horror story. Write that down. Look for it. You have to look for it online. It tells you about the government right now borrowing so much money from our grandchildren. That's where all the money is to run the country, from our grandchildren. They're putting us into so much debt to the World Bank.
We are investing 7 times the amount the Tories were.
Politicians keep talking about what they're going to spend, as though it's their money.
Britain will be investing twice as much in our school children, 3 times as much in the NHS.
Help with heating bills, insulation, social tariffs.
1 million pensioners' homes insulated.
They haven't got any of their own money.
Doubling of the science budget.
Paid holidays for all workers.
The government doesn't have any money of its own.
Spending
money.
More. Spending free museum entry.
They've got our money.
It's not their money.
Today in Britain, the government spends more than all private individuals and companies put together.
They spent like there was no tomorrow.
350,000, 1 million.
1 million.
34 million.
You spend like that, eventually there won't be.
The last government tested to destruction the idea that more spending was the answer.
Today in Britain, the public sector is bigger than the private sector.
Thank you.
It's absolutely enormous, the size of the state now.
I've got £90,000 in my pyjamas.
George Osborne says his cuts will save Britain.
We will make sure that the financial catastrophe that happened under the previous government never ever happens again. Nothing quite as wonderful as money.
But in the next 5 years, annual government spending will climb from £697 billion to £757 billion.
There are areas where more public money could usefully be spent.
What the government describe as a cut are not what you and I would normally think of as a cut. More money, increases in spending is not going to be enough.
During all that time, we will be adding to the total indebtedness of the country.
The cuts are too little, too late. We now have a national debt of £4.8 trillion.
The figures involved are mind-blowing.
That's £77,000 for every man, woman and child in the United Kingdom. The government is borrowing money from people who haven't even been born yet.
There's Debt Boy. Right, there's a video there. It's called The Employment. Basically summed up, it says everybody is somebody else's bitch. It doesn't matter who you're dealing with. It shows you all these, basically someone who's at a high level that tries to scare you and tell you what to do. They will run off to their boss like a little poodle. They go, oh, here's what I've done. Everybody is just somebody else's bitch. Don't be scared of anybody. Slavery, this is what I'm trying to get to. Slavery you think's abolished. Right, here is the legislation.gov, the Modern Slavery Act 2015. There's England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. What would happen if you stopped paying your mortgage? You know, do you have to work every day? Do you just have to go out to work every day to pay bills? Are you in a position that you could stop working if your health or something happened to your son that you couldn't work? Is it a leap of faith to suggest that you're being forced to perform compulsory labour every day to keep yourself a roof over your head? Are you being exploited and held in servitude by the banks? I would say you are. So it says there, a person commits an offence. This is legislation today. A person commits an offence if a person holds another person in slavery or servitude in the circumstances that he know or ought to know, and that he requires the other person to do forced or compulsory labour. So by banks not lending you money but pretending they did, and forcing you to go out and work for 30 years under false pretences, are you a debt slave? The Modern Slavery Act says you are. Right? So the suicide aspect in Northern Ireland and down south, I want everybody to go on a mortgage strike. I've stood up here, I've got all the arrows pulled out of me everywhere. I've lost my job, I've lost my pension, I've been publicly named and shamed as a police officer and placed in danger. I was in jail for 6 weeks. My family suffered a lot. I've been bent over and shafted, basically, and made an example of. So if I've been through all of this and I'm still standing here fighting, will you go out and check and investigate your mortgage and see if there's fraud in your home? Go to land registry, go and get a copy of all your documents, find out where your mortgage is. Most of the time the banks make so many mistakes that you don't actually have a mortgage. There's no enforceability if you go and challenge it and go and look. Send letters to your bank and ask them, did they lend you money? Did they actually lend you money, or did they facilitate credit? Ask them. And when they don't answer that question, ask them if they securitized your mortgage. They probably won't answer that. When they don't answer your question, send them 3 letters. After the 3rd letter, submit a complaint to the Financial Conduct Authority. And once your account is in dispute, you can legally stop paying it until that's resolved. Everybody, UK-wide, needs to stop paying their mortgages because they're all unlawful. You know, I'll stand there every day of the week fighting this, but everybody else needs to do it to come and help. Venus Project. That's it, there it is. So remember, the fight is for the ones we love, and that's the Munchkins. There you go. I'm a good Liverpool fan, so there you go. I've been Anthony Carlin, and thanks very much.
Well done, mate. Well done.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Carlin. He's not a professional speaker, but I got a feeling he might be telling that story 1 or 2 more times over the coming months and years. And you know, like a lot of us, the collective us, we are accidental activists. You know, born into what it is we do by circumstances that we don't actually remember signing up to, but I'm sure we did. And what an example! And you know, this is the essence. The absolute essence, you know, way beyond the keyboard warrior. You know, people talk about a truth movement. The truth movement's a nursery. You know, it's getting beyond that. It's getting to the stage where you're actually up there challenging the system, and what better example than Anthony Carlin. So Anthony and Maxine, thank you so much.
Just one last thing. I spoke to Zen Gardner and Willem last night, so I challenged Willem to get more slides into his presentation than I got. It's a slide off, and Zen challenged me to wear my Guantanamo Bay t-shirt. So I knew before I was convicted, I knew when the trial was up that I was going to be convicted and I was going to go to jail. So I bought me Guantanamo Bay t-shirt, and then I wore it in prison for the visits. And the prison officers were going, nice one, yeah. You know, they were giving me a fist pump and all, so it went down well. So thank you.